Next one. Uh, how many times the name of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is mentioned in Quran? 4 plus 1. 5. 4 times Muhammad, 1 time Ahmad. So 5. So let's look at one of those examples. I put the verse here in front of you. This verse is from what? Surat Al-Imran. These are the verses. I'll just read one of them, inshallah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. وما محمد إلا رسول قد خلت من قبله الرسل أفإن مات أو قتل انقلبتم على أعقابكم ومن ينقلب على عقبيه فلن يضر الله شيئا وسيجزي الله الشاكرين. The translation, the meaning of that is, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is no more than a messenger, and indeed many messengers have passed away before him. If he dies or is killed, will you then turn back on your heels? And he who turns back on his heels, not the least harm will he do to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Allah will give reward to those who are grateful. The same verse that, that time of, he was recited by Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu when Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam passed away, to calm down people who were not able to accept the fact that he passed away. We'll see later on that story. But these are the other surahs. This one is Muhammadur Rasulullah, you know that, and As-Saf, as the brother said, is the name Ahmad is mentioned. You know the context where Ahmad was mentioned? Yes. Isa alayhi salam, that he said somebody with the name Ahmad will come. And that was, we'll see actually some examples from the previous books in which cases the name of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was mentioned. Before I go into that, there's another name of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is the kunya. Kunya means basically a name that is given to a person. In those days they used to give kunya by their children. So his son's name was Qasim. So his kunya became Abul Qasim. So people used to call Abu or so that becomes your kunya after your children. So that name was also given to Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And there's interesting thing, one hadith which mentions that do not use my kunya as your name. It's a hadith. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam forbade people to use this name, Abul Qasim. Why? Because if multiple people keep the same name and people say Abul Qasim said that, people will consider that, hey, this is a hadith now, but actually it was said by some other Abul Qasim. But so scholars said that at that time it was prohibited, but now everybody knows that there is just that Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is no more with us, so there's no confusion. But at that time it was prohibited. And there are lots of names that you will see people using it. In fact, there are some scholars who came out with the list of 100 names, 500 names of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Ibn al-Arabi, he came up with 1,000 names, and Suyuti rahmatullah came with 500 names. But actually the other scholars said that most of these names are attributes. It's not like a name itself. So for example, the name that we often hear, Mustafa, that's a very right attribute of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but that wasn't his name, right? So what does Mustafa mean? The chosen one, the one who was chosen by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? So he was chosen, definitely, but it is an attribute, and it was never used by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself. Those 5 names that we mentioned, that came from the mouth of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. These are my names. For example, one of our sheikhs said that like you don't call a person eater, right? People eat. That's an attribute. That's a description. You don't call, hey, here comes the eater, right? So just because he eats doesn't mean that you call him eater. So same thing with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So there are few things that describe him, right? So same thing with other names called Sirajun, Munir, Al-Amin, Mahmud. In Quran, he is also mentioned with what names?
Yasin.
Muzzammil, Muddathir. Yasin is Yasin Taha. I don't know why people use that. It's not at all even an attribute or a name. Those are, as we mentioned, those are muqatta'at, right? There's only Allah knows what that meaning is. So that's definitely not his name nor attribute. Nabiul Rahman, Nabiul Tawbah, people use many of them. But you can use those attributes, and you can also keep all these names, as you mentioned before. You can name your children. There's no problem. But the names, as we know, most of the scholars said it is just 5. His name in Torah and the Gospels. So we know that the books, the Torah, the Bible, Injil, and the Jews and Christians that used to read, that came from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as well, right? They just didn't come up with themselves. However, as we know, they modified it. Their rabbis modified it just to suit their political agenda or whatever their ideology they wanted to fit. They changed it. But since it was revealed from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that was authentic, and the people who followed it were considered Muslims according to the definition of Islam. They were Muslims. But when it got changed, everything got corrupted. So for example, name of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was mentioned by name in these scriptures. Yeah, I'll mention how many of them. This is the very, very specific, direct one that I wanted to read you. Barnabas, this is the most authentic, the very closest that you can say matches with exactly one-to-one with our Islamic ideology of Isa alayhi salam and other prophets. Barnabas, you try to read this book, and obviously they changed it now, and they say that it's it doesn't go along with the Christian beliefs right now, Catholic belief. But you see here what it says. It talks about the conversation of Isa alayhi salam with his disciples. When he was praising Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they asked him, "O Master, who shall be that man be of whom you speak, who shall come into this world?" So Jesus sallallahu alaihi wasallam answered with joy of heart. He said, "It's Muhammad," exactly by that name. And if you read the actual text, I think it was the different language, so that ha was missing in the language, so they maybe they call it differently, but it gets into Muhammad, the letter itself. And they recite Muhammad, or I don't know how they recite it, but that's how they recite. Even the Jews today recite the same name, Muhammad, something like that. Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, messenger of God, and when he comes into the world, even as the rain makes the earth to bear fruit when for a long time it has not rained. So we know many hadith how those miracles happen, right? That he prayed for dua, it came. And also he said, ever so shall he be occasion of good works among men, and the good will spread among them, through the abundant mercy which he shall bring, for he is a white cloud of mercy of God, which mercy God shall sprinkle upon the faithful like rain. So just read this one. I mean, some of it is actually changed by the rabbis, but most of them don't agree with the actual mentioning of Muhammad. Obviously, it goes against their ideology. And there are other mentions as well that I can give. So some of them is this one, Deuteronomy 18, 17, 19. You can look this up. And when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he first received a revelation from angel Jibreel alayhi salam. The Jibreel alayhi salam told him, what did he tell him first? Read, right? Iqra. So what did Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam reply to him? I cannot read, right? Cannot read. That one is mentioned here. Isaiah 29:12. That incident was actually mentioned before that. He said that, and when they give the book to the one who cannot read, saying, read this, he said, I cannot read. That was the description of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And also it was mentioned that in Deuteronomy, this one that I mentioned, 17:19, it was like, they clearly mentioned that a person will come from the brethren of yourselves. So you know that whole cycle, the whole genealogy, right? Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam came from Ismail alayhi salam, and the Musa alayhi salam and Isa alayhi salam came from a different branch, Ishaq alayhi salam, and they both came from Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam. So that's why in this it is mentioned that you are from amongst your brethren. So Ishaq alayhi salam and Ismail alayhi salam was from they were brothers, right? So that's how they came about. Yaqub alayhi salam was the son of Ishaq alayhi salam. Yeah. Let's look at their lineage, actually, the lineage of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is the authentic one. If you go to his father, grandfather, and all those tribes, this is the list that you don't need to remember all the names. There's some important names that you can remember. The family tree. This name Adnan is what we know is the authentic, most authentic. Above this one is disputable, but this name Adnan, he was the one who actually was he was the origin of Arabs in the Arab Peninsula. He was the first one, so he was the founder of Arab, and also this Fahr, his name was. That's what when we say Quraysh, right? Quraysh, that was his name. So that's why they're called Quraysh until this day. So Fahr, that name you can remember, and Abd Manaf is the famous tribe, and you know the tribe of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is recognized by what name? Banu Hashim, right? So that comes from that, and then all the people who used to live in Mecca, everybody was from Fahr, but Abd Manaf was the most famous and most powerful, influential, and then as we know Banu Hashim, Abdul Muttalib and Abdullah, and then finally our Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And after that, did his lineage continue? He didn't have any sons, only his children, grandchildren spread through his daughter Fatima radiallahu anha. So the prophet's genealogy, if you track down to Adam alayhi salam, all his forefathers were prophets. That's how the chain was, and it was at this point Ibrahim alayhi salam that it got into two chains. Ismail alayhi salam, as you mentioned, the other one was Ishaq alayhi salam, and then Musa alayhi salam came from that chain, Isa alayhi salam as well. So these were the tree, the prophetic genealogy. Those were his forefathers.